Here now to discuss this firing of James Comey, which some believe to be long overdue, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Fox News contributor John Bolton. Ambassador, this firing, many people had wanted to see it much sooner, say on January 20th. Your thoughts?
No, I was certainly one of those. I think if you read the Deputy Attorney General's memo, it makes it very clear how many times and in what significant ways Comey departed from long-established Department of Justice principles here in terms of discussing the Hillary Clinton investigation. I think from the get-go this was all about the greater glory of James Comey. And so I think what they've done now that they have the Deputy Attorney General in place so that there's no question that this has anything to do with the Russia investigation, better late than never on this firing is the way I'd put it.
The talking points are already playing out amongst the Democrats. The last 4 Democratic officials to speak embrace the quote-unquote Nixonian adjective for this termination. Your thoughts about coincidences, similarities, or none whatsoever?
There are no similarities here at all, and I just think it's a sad day in Washington when something that these Democrats know is the right thing to do, and who basically thought it, and many of them said it when they thought Hillary Clinton had been victimized by James Comey, turn around in a purely partisan fashion and try and make this Watergate comparison. When Comey gave the July press conference about Hillary Clinton and said he was usurping the Attorney General's prerogative to decide on prosecution, and then later in the October letter on reopening the investigation, he was wrong, wrong, wrong. This is basic to a presumption of innocence and the right of a citizen to confront his accusers. Prosecutors indict or they close the file. There's nothing in between.
And the coincidence with the misstatements by the director of the FBI talking about hundreds of thousands of classified emails. The director of the FBI, the former director of the FBI, was absolutely vainglorious in his presentations before Congress. He managed to offend just about everyone in both parties, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, look, I think this also shows why it's wrong to have congressional hearings into open investigations or even into investigations that are closed. I think if you're a private citizen and the government looks into whether to indict you for criminal behavior and they conclude for whatever reason they're not going to indict, that's the end of it. This has been I'll talk about something that's Nixonian and Watergate related. It goes back to the creation of the independent counsel statute, the special prosecutor statute by Peter Rodino after Watergate. A key provision of that statute was if an independent counsel doesn't indict, he has to prepare a public report on his investigation. So you get all the dirty linen laid out. And it's this idea that somehow people have a right to know what's going on when the government doesn't prosecute that's fundamentally wrong. It's wrong for the Democrats to have put it in the legislation, wrong for Jim Comey to have put it out about Hillary Clinton, right for him to be fired tonight.
You know, it's an excellent point that you make because it's the special counsel statute. That's outside the traditions of American jurisprudence and is
and unconstitutional,
and which is critically
despite
important.
The Supreme Court.
Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, making precisely that point. A man who, by the way, laid out the values and the regulations and what are now the traditions of how to report to the public and pursue an investigation, or how not to report to the public during an election year. And he says straightforwardly, the former director had violated every one of those considerations. I want to turn very quickly to another very important event that is occurring today, and that is the apparent deliberation on the part of the president as to whether to follow the counsel of his national security advisor and others. Some are referring to it derisively as McMaster's war, the idea of sending as many as, we are told, 5,000 of our troops back into Afghanistan, which would be about a 60% increase in the troop levels there?
Well, I think it depends on what the strategy is. I haven't been graced with a copy of any of the internal memos from the White House, but I would say this.
You should call the general straight away.
If this is in fact to go after ISIS and al-Qaeda and step up our efforts there because of the risk that they pose, then I would be in favor of it. But if it's part of a larger nation-building strategy, I would be against it. And I think it's important that people understand there's a difference between a military intervention to defend a vital American interest here to be safe against terrorist attacks on the one hand versus nation building on the other. I have never believed we're good at nation building, whether it's a Republican president or a Democratic president. So I think it depends on what the strategy is, and at this point we don't know. I do think crushing ISIS and al-Qaeda remains directly in the national interest of this country.
Yeah, and it is also passing strange that the president is now being, it is being suggested the president is deliberating over these troop levels being increased when he had declared he would not be advertising his thinking strategically whatsoever to the advantage of the enemy. Your thoughts?
No, I think that's right. I think this is a clear case where talking about what we're going to do is just advertising to Taliban, ISIS, and al-Qaeda. And I will never forget the famous comment that the Taliban have made about Americans. They say, you have the watches, we have the time. We have to have the patience to defeat these terrorist groups, or we will be continuously under risk here at home. That doesn't mean we try and make Afghanistan into the Switzerland of Central Asia.
No, but it does mean things like we don't take 16 years as a superpower and find ourselves in a stalemate with a medieval group of guerrillas who are acting against the interest of the United States. This has been, I think, a heinous period of military history, U.S. military history, in which our general officers have not been able to provide victory to the commander-in-chief, to the American people. And I damn well think that it's about time that there's some humility, whether it's the National Security Advisor, whether it's the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or whomever advising the commander-in-chief, about what they can do, will do, and how effectively, efficiently, and with what finality.
Yeah, I think it's widely viewed in the past 8 years that the rules of engagement that our forces have had to operate under have been far too restrictive, unduly restraining their ability to do what they need to do. And at least one aspect of what's under deliberation now that we're talking about it in public is some granting of increased discretion to commanders in the field, which I think if we had done that 10 years ago might have made a difference in the length of this struggle.